Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devyam Atriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chidaramasya Sarvadharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtai Ramakrishnaya Mangalam Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankarachara Madhyamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Saraswati Namo Namaha Veda Vedanta Vedanta Stanevacha Vidyastanevacha Sri Ganesha Sharad Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Sri Hari Jayama. So continuing our discussion on the readings, discussion on the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in the 10th skanda, 10th canto, which deals with Krishna Lila, primarily with Krishna Lila. And right now we're reading the prayers of Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma stole the cows in a due to some maya. He became bewildered, maybe by his own ego or by the grace of the Lord. And he thought, let me steal the cows and cowherd boys while Krishna was. And that they were out in pasture. And within a second, Krishna created a whole new set of cows, a whole new set of boys, and they lived 1 year, him playing all the parts. And that's a big theme in the Bhagavatam, that Krishna is playing all the parts. Right? That's a profound realization, of course. So Brahma, realizing this, his mistake, if it's a mistake, he prays to Lord Krishna in this group of prayers. So the last few weeks we read, I think, the first 5 verses. So for the sake of to get myself into it, I'll just read the 5 that we read so far. Brahma uvacha. Lord Brahma said, Sri Brahma said, I worship you, the primeval Lord, whose body is like a dark cloud, whose garment is like lightning, wearing a garland of gunja berries and a peacock feather, whose face shines, wears a garland of forest flowers, holding a morsel of food, stick, buffalo horn, and flute, and whose beautiful feet are soft, the son of a cowherder. Lord, your body, that's described, which is an instrument of grace to me, appears by your will, and not by the power of the material elements. Even with my mind withdrawn in meditation, I cannot grasp its glory. What to speak, then, of understanding in your blissful self? Those who give up the path of knowledge and simply bow to you, worship you, spending their lives hearing about you from the lips of saints, in whatever condition they are, meditate on what they have heard with their body, mind, and speech. O unconquerable one, you are conquered by them in the 3 worlds. There are some who reject the auspicious path of bhakti. They struggle to know you, O Lord, with their minds alone. The only thing they achieve is that struggle, and nothing more. It is just like beating empty husks. In the past, O Infinite One, many yogis offered whatever they did to you, and through bhakti cultivated by hearing about you, easily surrendered to you, O infallible one, and attained you the supreme goal. We talked a lot about the supreme goal, param gatim. So now we're on verse 6. Tathāpi bhūman mahimāguṇasya viboddhum artya amalāntar-ātmabhiḥ avikriyāt, svānubhavād, arūpato, ananya-bodhyātmatayā, cānyathā. So in the previous verses, he says actually it's just with the mind. People who try to give up the path of devotion and just try to capture you with their mind alone fail completely. All they get is a struggle of that work and don't get it. But those who just worship you, loving you, bowing to you, in whatever condition they find themselves, based upon what they've heard from the devotees, from the lips of devotees, they easily surrender to you and easily attain you. Even that term, even though the Lord is described as unconquerable, unattainable, unconquerable, ununderstandable, they conquer the Lord. They understand the Lord. But that's not the. But there is other path. So the idea of like we're just trying to capture the Lord, trying to understand the truth, trying to understand God only with the mind. That Krishna is saying is not possible. And just with devotion, it's possible. That's stated, right? Right. But there's other methods that is not exactly just devotional practice, right? And it's not just philosophical, mental speculation and inquiry, right? So it says there is methods of meditation which tries to find the transcendent being, the self, right? I remember in the beginning of this, the beginning of the whole book, Krishna mentioned that one non-dual truth is can be known, or it has three features. It can be understood, related to, or realized in three features: Bhagavan, Paramatma, Atma, Paramatma, and Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Right. So this verse is describing trying to find the self through meditation. So it's not that's not possible. It's not easy, but it's not possible. But it is possible. So he says, I'll read the verse as it is. Nevertheless, O infinite one, tathāpi bhūman, your infinite nature beyond the gunas, changeless, formless, and self-effulgent, can be known by self-realization, by one whose mind and senses are pure and indrawn, through one's own direct perception, and not otherwise. So in spite of that, there is possibility of knowledge through profound meditation and inner experience, the deep mystical types of experiences, right? So it describes first aside the name, because these are all prayers. Most of them have like, oh you who are unconquerable, they get conquered, right? So this is one, bhūman, huge, infinite, right? And actually this term bhūman, like our Swami Bhajanananda, that's where he gets his name, Bhajanananda Tirtha. There was one nice Swami here a few days back. Swami Bhajanananda, Bhuma, and that's a term from some Upanishad. I forget anything, but it's from an important Upanishad, right? Right. But there's a great line. It says that actually happiness is found only in the Bhuma, in the infinite, in the huge. Maybe you can open oh yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I think they figure it out. Bliss is only to be found in the Bhuma. Happiness or bliss is not to be found in the limited, right? Therefore, search for the infinite, right? So here the Lord described, you are, O infinite one, and then it says, tathāpi bhūman, your infinite nature, mahimā aguṇasya te. Your again, like Bhuma and Mahima is great, infinite, also the same thing. You who are infinite, right? You are also your infinite is your nature that's aguna, without qualities, right? The ground of being, without. So you do have a nature that's infinite and aguna. You have, or we would say in nirguna. Saguna and nirguna. This is describing the nirguna aspect, right? What are the qualities? Now we're getting to classic Vedantic type of statements we're accustomed to in Vedanta, Advaita adjacent traditions. Over here, these terms, right? To use that term, it says avikriyāt means changeless, right? And of course, it's described. He's seeing Krishna, who changes, right, and who has so much lila and creates a changeable universe, right? So there's another aspect of Krishna that is changeless, right? And then it's arūpatah, and is formless, right? So when this aguna nirguna is avikriyāt, is changeless, arūpah, and is formless. And then it says, and it's this term, actually I looked at 4 translations trying to understand this term. My Sanskrit's not strong enough to get the full meaning, but something like it can be known, ananya-bodhyātmatayā, it can be known, ātmatayā viboddhum, right? By those, or by somebody who realizes the self, right? Atma-viboddha, one who has realization, knowledge, experience. Viboddhum is like a Buddha, you know, like awakening. Vibuddha is like awakening, and of the inner self. So those, it can be known through your formless, your actionless, your infinite, your beyond gunas, quality, can be known by those who have self-knowledge. One translation is one by the Gita Press translation, says actually by taught by one who is taught by one who has self-knowledge. In other words, by a guru. Maybe that's what it means. Like I said, this is part I don't know where I can't find it perfectly. So I'm trusting what I understand and what the translations that I'm consulting. Right. So it can be known, and actually this aguna, interesting because the nirgun, right? It doesn't say exactly nirgun, without qualities. It's aguna. Maybe it's the same thing, right? But aguna has been, by some commentators, it's not just that that God or the Brahman or Atman has no qualities, right? Is that it's beyond qualities, right? It's beyond. It's the source of qualities. It's a substratum of qualities. It's the container for qualities. In that sense, and therefore it can't be understood. Right? All qualities exist within and come from it. It's beyond. It's by nature transcendental. And guna also, by commentators, it said this is reference. What are the gunas? The gunas of Prakriti are gunas of Prakriti, which means Prakriti, right? So aguna means you're not Prakriti, which means that you're not material. You're spiritual. You're not matter. You're consciousness. So it could be that type of thing. Not necessarily describing, but then it goes on to describe uncreated, unmoving, without form, beyond form, like that. But that's interesting when you say aguna, it means without gunas, but it also can mean, has been interpreted to mean that beyond Prakriti, right? Not Prakriti. That means transcendental, or like in common. Can be known through self-realization, right? But there are prerequisites, and those are given by one whose mind and senses are pure and indrawn. Arhaty amalam antar-ātmabhih. One whose mind is without, whose mind and senses, whose mind is without taint. That means to a purified mind. So purified mind means and indrawn, antar-ātmabhih. One whose dwelling, whose senses are focused on the self. Right, and I'm thinking I'm actually 2 examples for these 2. One is the amalam, whose mind is pure and stainless, and the other one whose mind is focused on the self. We have in our life 2. Actually, I have 4 Swami Omanandas in my life, but 2 are primary. So Swami Omananda Saraswati, our sannyas guru, he always says, and you've heard me say this because we repeat what he says, as is the definition of parampara, right? We repeat what he says, at least some things he says. He says that all sadhana is manashuddhi, the purification, purify the mind. And the mind is purified, then the self stands revealed. Our Guruji used to say also, Swami Vishwanavananda Maharaj, he would also say that actually the self is the most obvious thing, but the mind is in the way. We don't see the impure mind, the turbulent, the agitated body, turbulent and impure mind doesn't see it. Right, so yoga is to control the body, control the mind internal focus, and then you can see what's already obviously there, to use his language. And the other Swami Omananda Puri, a wonderful sadhu, Ramakrishna order sadhu, and he very often walking at the Kumbh Mela. He was this last year. I don't think he went. We didn't see, but almost every year he's at Kumbh Mela, and we spend a lot of time together. And very often he says this: "You need antar-ātmabhiḥ." That was his language. This is secret. I can't tell this publicly. Nobody will want to hear these things. If you talk these things in public, they don't let you talk again, right? Because if everybody wants to do something big and you say, but actually you need to. He also says that they're trying to get me to run centers. They're trying to be like that, but I want to be inside, right? And the mind should be indrawn and focus on the self, right? So this is perhaps what this means. So so it can the aguṇasya, the spiritual or without, either transcendental, beyond prakriti, or without qualities, whose nature is changeless and formless, can be known through self-realization, but it requires a purified mind and inward focusing, right? And what happens? Svānubhavād, right? Through one's own intuitive, personal, direct experience, right? So to try to understand from last week, to try to understand God only with the mind alone, you only get frustration out of that. It's not possible. Simply thinking of God with devotion, right? You can actually get God, right? But there's other methods. There's also yogic type of methods of meditation, right? So many, and you can't dismiss them, because the Bhagavatam itself is full of stories of yogis who've meditated and had self-realization, right? That aren't necessarily, not obviously practicing the practices of bhakti, but the practices of meditation, right? So it is possible, but the mind has to become very pure and in inward focus, and then through direct experience you can be known, right? It says, nacha ananya-bodhyātmatayā, and not other than that. That's no other, beyond that, or otherwise not. Maybe that's how we say it. Otherwise not, right? So I'll read that again. Nevertheless, O Infinite One, your infinite nature beyond the gunas, changeless, formless, and self-effulgent, can be known through self-realization by one whose mind and senses are pure and indrawn, through one's own direct perception, that's anubhava, and not otherwise. So, your aguna aspect can be known this way, but can your guna aspect, can your qualities be understood through the mind, right? So it's not even like can you be completely comprehended, but can even your, I mean, he's going to use a very similar thing you've heard, like, oh, what is that? Shiv Mahimna Stotram, Swami Chitananda quotes this verse all the time. Sri Ramakrishna, I think, went to ecstasy meditating on this, hearing this verse once. That if the goddess of fortune were to using the central pillar of the world as a pen, and the mountains of the earth as the paper, and the oceans as the ink pot, were to write for tens of thousands of years, should never finish describing your glory. Right, so that's this good. So this verse is going to be something like that. Can your glories really be known? Right, can never really be known. Right. So it says, "O self of the gunas." So in this previous verse, it says, "You who are aguna." Right here, it's guna atmana. Right, you're the essence of the gunas, or the self of the guna of the gunas, essence of it. Right. So. Yeah, you're beyond, and you're the source and soul of the gunas. Or if the gunas mean qualities, it's the source and soul of all qualities. If the gunas here means prakriti, which, like I said, one traditional way of understanding these verses, then it means that you are the essence, you're the soul within prakriti, or the soul of prakriti, right? Like this. To count your qualities, right? O self of the gunas, to count your qualities, O you who incarnated for the good of all, hita avatarnasya, right? Your avatar. You took in an incarnation avatar for hita, for in order to do good to everyone, right? So this is great. Oh, you who are the self of the gunas, you who are incarnated for the good of all. To count your qualities is like it says a very great person, a genius. This is equivalent in the Mahimā Stotram as Saraswati. Some extremely qualified person, extremely brilliant person, right? Is like a genius for all eternity, right? Counting, what are they counting? All the grains of sands on the earth, all right? All drops of water in the air, right? And all stars in the sky, right? Right. So to count your glories, O you count your glories, or to count your gunas, your qualities, O you who are the essence or the soul or the source of all qualities, right? Would be like even a genius counting for all time, every speck of sand, every drop of water, every star in the sky. In traditional Vishwanath Chakrabarti, a traditional Vaishnava commentary on this verse, has stated actually there is such people who've done this, mentioned in the scriptures, right? There is one particular plenary expansion of Vishnu or something like that has been known to have counted every star of the sky, every drop of water, every grain of sand on an infinite amount of beaches like that. So he says it actually is possible. But that is possible, but difficult. But it is absolutely impossible to understand to the God's qualities. The same example is expanded, right? But then in the middle of this, it stuck this term hita avataram, hita avatirnasya. Right, you who have incarnated for the good of all. So that's actually, perhaps this is, Sri Ramakrishna uses this example of that we cannot comprehend the infinite God, but we can comprehend the avatar. Right. That's he gave different examples. One example, we quoted this a little bit last week also, but like a hole in a wall, or a window on a wall, where you're stuck. We're in a house. We're stuck in a room. Right, and there's the infinite outside, right? How do you know the infinite? You can see the whole infinite outside through the hole, right? He says the avatar is such a hole. Or again, the other example is, he gives many examples. Another example, like milk is in the body of a cow, but through the udder of the cow you can get like this. So there's ways to comprehend. You can touch the infinite through the avatar. So he's saying actually to understand the glories of God, the glories and powers and qualities of Krishna is impossible, but you've taken an avatar first for this, because contemplating, it starts out meditating on this form of Krishna and describing that who's incarnated to show grace to me, right? So that perhaps this is generally how this verse is understood, that through the avatar of Krishna, God has taken a form, or has a form, revealed a form and taken a form for the sake, and for that we can actually contemplate that He, which is beyond form, aguna, and all, beyond qualities, and is a source and substratum, the self of qualities. And last week we were to illustrate the other previous verse is like if you look through a window, it's not exactly the same as knowing the infinite, but it's a way of seeing the infinite, the sky outside, right? Or to drink milk from an udder is not exactly drinking all the milk in the whole body of a cow, but it's a way of accessing it, right? And for a devotee, that may be sufficient, right? We want, the example I used last week is of like if I'm drunk with one bottle of wine, do I need to know all the wine in every tavern everywhere in the world when one bottle is enough, right? Or do I need to drink every bottle of wine in every tavern in the world? right? One bottle is enough for me, right? Or the other one is that he gives of touching the Ganga. If you touch the Ganga in Calcutta, it's the same as touching. You don't have to. I mean, maybe. I mean, you can't say if I touch the Ganga. It's not the same as saying I've touched the water from Gangotri to Gangasagar, right? If you want to say that, well, that's a difficult thing. Maybe it's easier to count stars and sand and particles of water than to do that, right? But it doesn't mean you can't touch the Ganga. You can touch it someplace. You can go to the Ganga and touch it. So you may not be able to comprehend the infinite glories, infinite powers, infinite qualities, all right, of God, but you can touch God, right? And for a devotee, that may just be enough, right? Or I'm thinking of another example Sri Ramakrishna gives is that if you want to know, like, if we think of what are all the qualities of God, God's creation, His powers, His qualities, His tattvas and shaktis, and and you can go on thinking all the things unlimited, impossible to think, right? And so Sri Ramakrishna describes that as like trying to understand like the king's all the riches and power and paraphernalia the king has, right? It's practically speaking, on your own, it's not possible. We can never know, right? We can't even know ourselves on our own. What to speak of like a very powerful, like that. But he said if you get to know the king and become his friend, right? Then of course maybe you don't need to know how many cars and how many palaces like that. But if you need to know or if you want to know, he can show or tell you directly, right? So that's the thing, is that so it's the avatar, the manifest, the incarnation is the way to know, the only way to know the infinite qualities of God. So one of the things I have in my notes, I wrote this note 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I'm thinking, I wonder what I meant by that. So let me think. It's a good point. I'll say whether or not I can connect to the verse. It says the instrument is wrong, right? Because the mind trying to contemplate the infinite qualities of Bhagavan, of anything, right, with a limited mind is not possible, right? Something, and also with aguna or nirguna or arupa, right, with a mind that has qualities, has form, has action, right, is not possible. It's a wrong instrument, right? So the statement here, this is the devotional. The section is talking about the glory of bhakti, right? So the claim is that by bhakti you can know, maybe not all the infinite qualities, but you can know the one who has infinite qualities, right, and intimately know the one who has infinite qualities. Right, and so it's a different organ. So what's the organ? The organ is the heart, right? And so then you have kind of a poetic, illogical poetry. Best poetry is illogical, right? There's these are verses from the Bhagavatam and other devotional texts. You may have heard such things. I think even Sri Ramakrishna's some songs may have this or something, where it's like infinite trillions of universes. I mean, the descriptions in the Puranas are very like we know. We have our world and we have our galaxy and the universe, right? Now imagine infinite amount of universes and infinite amounts of infinite universes coming and going with the closing and opening of Vishnu's eyes, right? Or Brahma's eyes, right? Now Brahma opens his eyes and trillions of universes come and go, right, and closes his eyes, and then goes back into the flower, lotus flower, and then again comes out, and again. So that at the same time, we think, oh, that's really impressive. It's pretty mind-blowing. But it's also described that there's an infinite amount of Vishnus doing this, right? So it's a huge conception, right? Right. That whole thing is within whatever we mean by Bhagavan, right? Everything's within that, right? Like. But then it's the devotee says, devotional literature says, but that Lord is within the devotee's heart, right? So that is mysterious. So you can't comprehend. It's literally impossible to comprehend the infinite God, right? But that infinite God can be held. The infinite can be held within something seemingly limited, right? The heart is very limited, right? But it's bigger than God. That's the thing. Is it really? Maybe it isn't. But God seems to, in the stories, in the Bhagavat tradition, right? Love and devotion is so dear that God fully accepts it. Accepts this.
Is it confusing having the door closed? Is it confusing having the door
I think because this was kind of open and that one's closed.
Oh,
If we close that, then people will know. That's the thing. That's why it's confusing. If you close this one, yeah, because this one looks open, that one looks closed. It was my misdeed. Yeah, I do.
Got it.
The universe is within the Lord. The Lord is within the heart of the bhakta. Right. And then Sri Ramakrishna said, actually, you want to find God, the Lord we're searching for, is found in the hearts of bhaktas. Right. He says, what he says, the Lord is it's translated as drawing room. What's the room, sir? I forget. But it's the living room. It's because you could say, and Sri Ramakrishna said, this is not that big of a house, but there's a big enough house. There's 4 or 5 rooms. 4 rooms, 5 rooms. But you can say, so this is not his Ma's house, but it's this is Ma's house. I have to be careful. I don't want to. Yeah, even in the example, you can really. This is dangerous. And this is Ma's house, right? And so she's in the entire universe, and they call this Kalibari. This is Ma's house, Kali's house, right? But and you can go. It's like, people go and they look out in the garden, they see beautiful like that, but they haven't seen her yet, right? If you want to find her, you have to go to her shrine room. Right. So similarly, the God who's everywhere, right, can be found where he's most obvious, right, and that's in the heart of your heart or the heart of devotees, right. And also this idea of gunas, like unlimited gunas, it could be like the gunas of prakriti, the gunas of like creation and cycle and the worlds and beings and like that, which is infinite, right. But I think there's a play here because of the nature of these verses, the things that discussed in these verses. It's also the qualities of, like, what happened, what caused this, is that Brahma became bewildered, seeing how Krishna entered a cave, got attacked by a giant serpent, became himself so big, and he killed the serpent. Right, that's the immediately preceding story, right? So it's like, this boy is not normal. His qualities, his gunas are extraordinary. Right, and then so he did this trick on him and stole the cows and all of a sudden there's more cows and more like these are his gunas also. These are the glories of God, the powers of Krishna's Leela, also infinite and can't be known, can't be counted. Not that they can't be known, they can't be fully comprehended. Right. These are the very things, the qualities, the gunas, are the very things that have bewildered Brahma. Right. And so this is what he's contemplating on. So then, verse 8. Let me see if I can. Therefore, right, so I'll read that verse, the previous verse. O self of the gunas, to count your qualities, you who have incarnated for the good of the world, is like a genius for all eternity, counting all the grains of sand on earth, all the drops of water in the air, and all the stars in the sky. Next verse. Therefore, whoever lives depending upon your compassion, right? So how are we to understand God? How are we to find liberation? What's our hope then? If we can't come to try to understand God just as the mind is impossible, try to meditate upon God as possible, but very difficult, right? To profound meditation experience, to try to understand God's qualities, the gunas of this world and God's creation or his divine attributes is impossible, right? What is the way, right? So he gives a path forward. He gives a beginning sadhana, right? Therefore, whoever lives, depending upon your compassion, right, tolerating the results of their own actions, bhujana eva atma kritam vipakam, right, tolerating the results of one's own, in other words, karma, right? I mean, so suffering is going to come in life. Good and bad is going to come in life due to the result of our past activities, right? So it says tolerating those, right? And surrendering to you with heart, words, and body. Hritbhak papurbi, right? And surrenders and bowing to you. I didn't put that in the translation. I just see namahate. Bows and surrenders to you with mind, body, and speech, right? So depending upon your compassion, whoever we should live depending upon your compassion, tolerating the results of karma, right? And surrendering to you with heart, words, and body, right? Becomes the rightful heir to liberation, right? So that liberation becomes expected, right? That's just like a child inherits. Eventually, you'll inherit your father's wealth. So eventually, liberation is guaranteed, right? Yeah. So it seems easy. It's easy. It's easier, perhaps. It's like, oh, well, this is definitely easier than trying to understand God with the mind. That's not going to work. Or it's going to be easier than profound things of meditation with completely pure and indrawn mind. That's going to be hard. Or it definitely looks easier than counting the grains of sand and the drops of water and the stars in the sky, right? So it seems easy in this. All we have to do is just live our life depending upon God's mercy and tolerating our karmas, right? And loving, engaging in surrendering and devotion with mind, body, and speech, right? So that's easy, right? So I think it's maybe not easy. If we said bhakti yoga is not easy, right? But you can see that's possible. Theoretically, it's possible. See, counting the glories of God, that's impossible. Finding God only with the mind, according to God, is impossible. Even profound self-realization, that's possible. But it's like but praying to God for mercy, that's very possible, right? There's a there's a say Pure Land Buddhism. There's a form of Buddhism. Majority of Buddhists in the world are members of Pure Land sects that believe that if by calling out the name of particular Buddha, usually Amida Buddha, but there's other sects that have different Buddhas, right? That you'll be born in his Pure Land, right? So there's a saying. This is a Pure Land sectarian saying for Pure Land Buddhists, right? It says that 1 in 10,000 practitioners of Zen attain satori, right? Zen is really hard. Right, there's a path of extreme meditation, right? He says, but it's not impossible; it's possible, right? But he says 10,000 out of 10,000 Pure Land name reciters attain the Pure Land of Amida Buddha. Those who call out to this in the Kashan of Buddha will be born in his Pure Land, right? That's the claim, right? And so in Buddhism they call it own help and others help, or own strength and others. I mean, there's categories like what's that? Self-power. Yeah, self-power, and other power, right? They have a whole theology based upon this idea, right? But this is not exactly, but it's kind of that also. It's like it's not that it's impossible, right? Some things are impossible, some things are possible but difficult, right? This is possible, but difficult, right? It's not difficult, but it is, because actually what he says, depending upon your. So it says tolerating the results of their own action. Atmakritam. Right, what one himself has done, right? Which means your situation. So here's the view. This is the view of karma, right? The situation we're in is a result of what we've done. Maybe not in this life, in previous lives, right? That has led to our happiness, whatever. I mean, and you can see we don't only suffer, and we don't only are not always happy, right? We have all kinds of things fructifying, right? Some comment I read one. Traditional commentary on this verse, and it said, I can't remember who, maybe Vishwanath Chakrabarti also. It says that, let me find the word here. Actually, I highlighted it. Su samik shamano. Tolerant. The idea of waiting for your calling on your compassion and tolerating, right, is not just that, I'll just suffer and I'll just tolerate this. Something that's just tolerate your suffering, whatever comes, right? But also is depending who can end our suffering. Only God can end our suffering. So depending upon God's grace, if God chooses to give us grace. He's the only one who can help us. He can help us. If not, then we'll tolerate. We'll engage in our spiritual devotion wherever we are. Right. So this is interesting because, of course, whenever you bring up the idea of karma, it's not the same as like not doing anything about anything, right? Because our actions now are also a karma. There's natural reactions to things, right? But in spite of everything, there's certain things that are unavoidable, right? And we spend so much of our time avoiding things that are unavoidable. Or maybe maybe we can change our karma, right? But maybe that time could be spent on a particular spirit, on different pursuits. We have to think about these things, right? And so, we, of course, it's in religion, in Western religion, we can't get away from this. Why is there suffering? How would an all-loving God allow suffering? God is so good, yet we're suffering. So here it says God's so good, right? He's all merciful, has been born only to show mercy, right? Here it says also we're dependent upon His mercy, right? Yet we're suffering, but it didn't say suffering caused by God, right? If suffering caused by God, I think we can wave our fists into the air. That particular mood of some devotees. There's a mood of complaining and bitching to God. You did this, right? It's a very powerful, intimate relationship. Yeah, you have this. But see, it's your internal Bob. I think it's a legitimate Bob. You're not wrong. Yeah, you're not wrong. So it's not that. It's like, but many things. It's our own. Some things they're caused by our own, and some things we don't see, right? Of course, this is not the way everyone sees the world, right? But this is a traditional way. This is a presupposition, like this, right? And also, there's in the verse I think about a lot in Bhagavad Gita, verse 9, verse 33, chapter 9, verse 33, right? Second half of the verse, anityam asukam lokam. Right, it says, what is this world? We've come into what world have we come? It's anityam, it's temporary, and asukam, and not happy, not joyful. So if you're wondering why you're not perfectly happy, and things aren't, it is because the world we're in is not meant to be that. It's a temporary world, right? It's a changing world, at least, right? I guess it's temporary. It's like, right? Maybe the worlds exist forever, but it's like nothing is nothing, right? And so we shouldn't expect from a temporary world something that's not temporary, a world whose nature we get happy. We actually the people we find happy, right, are not people who have. Some people, okay, their material situation is really good, and I wish all of you a really good material situation, right? We want you to be healthy, safe, protected, not scared. All the things that we want, we wish that of you. We wish that to everybody like that, right? And so that's good. And if you can be happy that way, awesome. If you can be happy just with good material happiness, God bless you, right? May the goddess of fortune and Kubera bless you with this just like that. But most likely that won't happen. You're not going to always be in this type of happiness, right? And the people we find who are really happy are not necessarily happy because of material. Some people are materially safe and prosperous and healthy. Great, right? But the happiness is not the same thing as prosperous, safe, and healthy. These three, right? So we find maybe people who aren't people who either they accept their situation or they find their happiness from within, through art, through service, some other source that's not anityam and asukam, right? So the second half of second half of that verse, anityam asukam lokam imam prapya bhajasva mam, right? Having come into this transient and joyless world, very happy, happy message in the Gita, right? Engage in, it says, worship me. Because the reason we worship, because that's where happiness is, right? So one thing is like, well, why did God allow me to suffer? It's like, well, one thing is to think, well, maybe the suffering is my own actions. course, you could say a bigger thing, why does God allow us to make bad decisions, and that whole thing. I mean, it's a more sophisticated philosophical problem than I'm making up in a sub-point in a talk, right? Right. It's a very interesting topic. One of my favorite topics is this theodicy type discussions. But also the other thing is like, well, that if he made the world this way, he made the world this way. This is the material world is temporary. And the reason we're suffering in the temporary world is because we expect it not to be temporary. Right? So I've quoted this many times from my Guruji, Swami Bhajanananda Saraswati Maharaj. He says that we are searching permanent happiness, unchanging happiness, permanent happiness, infinite happiness, but we seek it in a changing, temporary, limited world, right? From temporary, limited things like that. In which case, and if you seek, his language is so direct, right? If you seek permanent value from an impermanent object, or infinite value from a finite object, like this, right? Eternal value from a temporary object, you are bound to be frustrated, right? I quoted this many times, and he says, frustrated we are. That's the situation we find ourselves in, right? So that's still the case, right? So fine, therefore, and back to the thing, he started these verses calling him bhūma, O infinite one. And happiness is found in the infinite, never in the finite, right? So if the world is meant, I can't say not meant to suffer, right? That's not the thing, right? But it's the nature of the world to be temporary, right? Anityam asukam lokam imam prapya bhajasya mam. Having come into this transient and asukam, joyless. That's a harsh word, right? Engage, worship me, engage in devotion to me, right? So the type of suffering we're talking about that we're meant to tolerate, right, is suffering from our own karmas, right, and the suffering of the nature of the world as temporary, right, as temporary and limited, right. So those two we have to suffer. So there's another category, suffering caused by others, right. That maybe we should react to suffering caused by others, right. And there's other forms of suffering. There's all kinds of of course there's traditional lists of causes of suffering caused by others, by ourselves, by nature, by the gods. There's abhautika and all those type of categories, right? But that which is caused by our own karma and that caused by the nature of the world has to be tolerated. It doesn't have to be tolerated. If we want to be happy, you'll have to tolerate it. And depending upon the Lord's grace, then we focus on the Lord of compassion that gives us strength during difficult times, right? But also, if there's going to be help on these type of things, he'll have to be the one we surrender to him. Right? So what does it say? Therefore, whoever lives depending upon your compassion, tolerating the results of their own actions, and surrendering to you with heart, words, and body, right? Worshipping you with heart, words, and body, becomes the rightful heir of liberation. Of course, last week also, we dealt with the different forms of liberation classically understood in Vedanta and Bhakti, right? Salokas, all those type of things. Whichever the form of liberation, right, or ultimate goal, or post-mortem existence one is searching for, whatever we think of it, right? This can be got just through as our right, as our inheritance. We're heirs, right? Sri Ramakrishna said this very nicely. He says that this is a line that M, in his old age, in the one text called the Srimad Darshan, and available in English as, what is it? M, the Apostle and the Evangelist, right? Right. I think, I only recently got more volumes, but in the 8-9 volumes I had, I think this line is probably 200-300 times. It's a very common thing. He quotes this a lot, right? Everybody, constantly, almost every meeting. He says, Thakur said that those who meditate upon him, right, inherit his wealth, just like a child inherits the wealth of his father, right? So and he said, what is my wealth? Or M says, what is the wealth? He says, well, Thakur was not a rich man. He was a rich man, but he didn't have a bank balance or anything. I think he made a couple of rupees right, from the temple as a staff priest, right? His wealth is, he says, is devotion, knowledge, renunciation, ecstasy, love, right, liberation. So we inherit by wait, yes, worship God in whatever situation you're in, depending upon His grace, and you'll inherit His wealth. His wealth is liberation. What a Thakur, we were quoting this with 3-4 days ago with Tiproji. This was you guys were quoting. I was overhearing. What is it? Kali Bhakta Jiva Mukta.
Basically, the devotee of Kali is liberated while living always.
So this is an interesting. The devotee of Kali. If you're devotees of Kali, I have some news for you. Sri Ramakrishna said, right, a devotee of Kali is a jiva mukta. I mean, somebody who's liberated while still in the body already, all the time, right? Of course, I don't always feel. I like to quote this. It's good for my self-image and my bio on my Wikipedia page or something like that. But it must be some truth to it, right? A devotee, and even the Gita makes statements like that a devotee is already liberated, right? Of course, when you think of somebody like there are great beings, the great sages, and who are, we think we've met some such beings, right? That they're not the normal bhaktas, right? People who are, if anybody's a jiva mukta in the modern world, we think we may have met one or two such beings, right? And we don't think we're anywhere near what they have attained, right? Right. But think about it, if you're meditating with heart, mind, and words, right, on Bhagavan, right, and by saying tolerating everything, and pretty much just like only thinking of God and not thinking about the world. I mean, your situation in the world, right? That's by definition a type of liberation. You're in the transcendental realm, at least during that time, right? So it's very profound. No. In fact, it's and this is 6:30, perfect timing. First, I'll check a little bit. So, I mean, these statements are, just simply by thinking of God, one is liberated, and tolerating with simply by thinking of the Lord's qualities and developing love and devotion to the Lord's by hearing about these divine topics from the lips of devotees, one conquers God. That was a big statement last week, right? That he conquers the unconquerable one, comprehends that which is incomprehensible. Right, so the big claims of the Bhakti tradition. These are the claims of the Bhakti tradition. And so I was thinking about these things. I was going back to various conversations with different sadhus. I'm thinking of the Pujari Maharaj, the Ramakrishna Mission head priest at Belima for many years. We simply know him as Pujari. You know his name? Pujari Maharaj. He's known as Pujari Maharaj. He's senior. It's almost there. But anyways, many times we've met him. I've quoted this before. Every time we've met him, we always get blessings. Oh, Maharaj, we're doing puja at Kali Mandir. He's a very expert pujari. And every time he gives me a saying, don't think that Ma Kali needs your flowers and your coconuts or your mantras. She's a goddess of countless trillions. I mean, she's the infinite goddess, right? She wants love, right? Because today we had, there's plenty of coconut prasad today. Somebody brought 40 coconuts, right? Right. It was a symptom. And Ma was like, "Oh, great! What I've always wanted is coconuts. Here, take boons." Right. I was suffering but these are symbols of her devotion, and she had a lot of devotion, right? And she brought was prayers and mantras like each one of these coconuts, right? Invoking Lord's grace, Mother's grace, but she wants love, right? And so that's a big thing that God wants love, right? And we always think when we think of devotion, something we think from our position. It's like, oh, we love God, or we're trying to love God, right? We need to love God, right? And then maybe that's true. And there's language like that. Oh, it's the nature of the soul to love God. Sri Ramakrishna gave the example of like the nature of a needle to be attracted to a magnet, right? And so the nature, we're naturally attracted to God. If you so if you get the needle near the magnet, the needle will be automatically drawn to the magnet, right? But within that example, the magnet's nature is to draw needles, right? It is our nature to be drawn, right? But it's the nature of the magnet to draw, right? There's a need. It's intrinsic to magnets to draw metallic needles, right? So it's using that language. It's the nature of God. If careful, we start talking about God's name, but this is the devotional text say. It's the nature of God to love and want love, right? And what I was thinking about this morning and doing a little bit of reminding myself of certain where it comes. It may be the first time really developed in the writings of Jiva Goswami, disciple, one of the main disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? He says that he called it and I'm wondering, maybe it's, I'm trying to remember if it's in the Bhagavatam, other places, but I think it may appear right around the time of Chaitanya, or during that time, this idea of Hladini Shakti. Hladini is the bliss Shakti, the joy Shakti. And it says Hladini Shakti is the innermost, this is the claim, the innermost Shakti of God is the Shakti of love, right? The incarnation of Hladini Shakti in the Krishna incarnation is Radha, right? She represents love. She is love of God. She is like love, right? And he says, but it's, so if we have some bhakti, it's not our quality. We think, oh, that person, Vijay has devotion. It's her quality. Actually, it's not her devotion. It's Krishna's Shakti, or it's Bhagavan Shakti, his inner Shakti. If we have devotion, it's Bhagavan's innermost Shakti on us, grace on us, right? Because he wants love. And this is how it's like this. And he longs for love, right? And therefore is willing to make all these strange concessions of being conquered, and all the stories of being conquered, being tied up by his mother, even though he's God, dancing to the clapping of the gopis, even though he's God, right? All these type of things, in these stories, right? So you have to think. I was thinking when I was reading, I was doing a little research on these few verses that kind of encapsulates this teaching of Jiva Goswami, right? I'm thinking then that could Ma sitting here waiting for somebody to love her, right? It's her nature to be so, right? We think, we get bliss because of when we love God, we find satisfaction and bliss, right? Because she's responding to us, right? She's pulling us, and it's of course our nature to be pulled, but that only works if there's a magnet. Without a magnet, a metal filing has no nature except being a metal needle stuck in mud, right? It's the grace, the Shakti of the magnet that pulls. Of course, it's our nature to be pulled, but it's the grace, it's the power of God. The interesting way of thinking, I think as we go through these final verses of next in a couple of weeks, I think I have 2 more classes designed for this section before Swami Chaitanya comes. We have to keep that in mind, that these verses almost only make sense is like when we think that it's God's very nature to want love, right? And maybe that's why. I mean, you have the statements like, "Why is there some things that have nothing? I am one, let me become many." The Upanishad says, "I am one, let me become many." Why? Right? So we can give all kinds of reasons why. And in some forms of tantra, it's swatantriya shakti, or different type like that. But in the devotional traditions, they say, the reason is because he wants love, right? And of course, he's only one, so he becomes many. He becomes us, so we can love. So this is paramgati. This is our supreme. In the Bhagavatam, this is given always as a supreme object, the supreme goal, the reason why we exist. Thank you for your kind attention. Any questions or comments? Yeah, I'll give you exactly 3 minutes.
Maharaj, I can understand that God's nature is to be loved.
Yeah.
But it's troubling to think that there's a desire to be loved. That would imply a lack of fullness in God. That God would want anything at all. Wouldn't she already?
Yeah, God is missing one thing: love.
Yes.
That requires another, and therefore now he has another, or she has another. She has an infinite numbers of others, right?
That's just built into the axiom. The characterization of God is that which desires to be loved and is of the nature to be loved.
Yeah.
And like bhaktas would be okay with the idea that like she's missing something, she needs something.
Yeah. That's the fullness.
Yeah.
That's the fullness, right? You know, I mean, this is perhaps an emotional way of justifying like that, but it's the engine behind the bhakti poets, the bhakti movements, right? Is why everything can be swept away, why everything exists. Otherwise, I mean, any of these, like, why is there anything? There's, I mean, you know, I know a bunch of versions of why there's things, why there's a world instead of nothing, how to, like, they're all okay. None of them make sense. They're all, I mean, these are just, I mean, they're fascinating. I'm interested in these things, right? But none of them are emotionally satisfying. This one's emotionally satisfying in a way that others aren't, right? It plays exactly that the very nature at the heart of reality. Then you end up with a extremely dynamic reality, right? You know, it's like if you have a perfectly full, desireless reality, then you don't get a dynamic reality. You end up with an impersonal Brahman of some sort, you know, an abstraction, right? But you have to, in order to have a dynamic absolute, where Brahman and Shakti are non-different, right? Or actually one of the definitions, a good working definition, one amongst many good working definitions of Shaktism, is the idea that the absolute is dynamic. So this is the devotional way of understanding how the absolute can be dynamic. Other forms would give another name to that primary Shakti that creates it, right? In the devotional, that Shakti, we can call it, other traditions may call it differently to emphasize a different quality or aspect of it. And the devotional, I mean, it's not forever. It's been developed like 500-600 years. This idea that I know what it is, right? This is the innermost core, the most intimate Shakti, right? Which is non-different from Bhagavan, non-different from Brahman. Is this Hladini Shakti, which is the joy that comes from love, right? And it's also like sometimes we also think we try to experience bliss, right? Or experience love, and we want to be experienced, but actually the language always is like actually. It's he or she is the experiencer, right? So she's the only subject. Yeah, it's the only subject. She's the experience. She's a doer. She's the experiencer. And so when we love God and we sing to God, we get joy out of it, right? But what if we didn't get joy out of it? Should we still sing to God? If we knew God was pleased by it, right? And so actually that may be the case. The scripture says God's pleased when you sing God's name, but sometimes, I mean. Sometimes the voices are good. Sometimes the drummer is not good. Or sometimes the mood is not good. My mind is crappy, and the sore throat, and you don't want. It's like, but still we do it because she likes it, right? And you can see like the stories. We're talking Bhagavatam, and the stories of Krishna. These are the examples given. So you have like a gopi. If something. Krishna's suffering, right? And what can I do to end his suffering? Or I'll do anything to make Krishna happy, right? They're not thinking, I'll do anything to become happy, right? We would think, and maybe that's the stage, an immature state, the ego gets involved in everything. But actually, the only existence of the gopis is only to make Krishna happy. And as a result, they experience the highest happiness. And so in this idea of a dynamic absolute, I'm remembering a life-transforming lecture from His Holiness Varshana Swami 30 years ago. Very advanced Vaishnava sadhu, we knew. And he says that Krishna is the source of everything. He's bliss itself and the ultimate enjoyer of bliss. Yet, somehow or another, he sees Radha is happy, experiences more bliss than him. I am God, by definition, bliss itself. And the only enjoyer, the ultimate enjoyer of bliss, and like that. Yet this aspect, my devotee, experienced more happiness, and she's not even doing it for herself; she's doing it out of love for me. Right? He says, "What is that?" Right? And so it says the way he described it. This is how he described. He even used the word a dynamic absolute, right? Which first time I heard this term, we now use it as a way of defining Shaktism, right? But the first time I heard it in the devotional line. He says, Radha looks at Krishna, and he's so beautiful, right, that her love increases and she becomes very blissful and beautiful. Krishna, seeing how Radha's become more beautiful, he's amazed by her beauty, and he becomes overwhelmed by emotion thinking about her beauty and her devotion, he becomes more beautiful and more, and he expands. Seeing him expand, Radha, love for him expands. Right? In this case, it's a dynamic, continuous, not a static absolute. I remember he used the term stuck in medieval theology, in a medieval theological framework, right? So, anyways, we can. These are the topics. Yeah, yes.
Well, Radha is his own Shakti, so the devotee is basically Shakti of God. And
yes. But this is the devotee is the Shakti of God in this understanding, right? But this is and maybe we could say, oh, we have that Shakti within. That the Radha, that's Ladini Shakti, right? But the mood of this is actually that this is a Shakti that's given. This is that we have.
But once it's given, then the devotee is one with the love of God. That's why it's so powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
One at love.
Yeah, for sure. And you have actually traditions. Of course, we always think of Krishna and Radha, and these stories about Krishna and Radha and the worship of Krishna, right? And Radha is held up as the greatest. The gopis are held up as the greatest devotees, and Radha is the queen of all devotees, like that, right? But then there's traditions. I think he uses this term like adjacent, to Chaitanya, that came around the time of Chaitanya out of the Vallabha tradition. The Hitmamsa and things like this, that actually they hold that Radha is the supreme, right? Krishna's God, no doubt, right? But he's not supreme, right? Radha is supreme because of this. That Ladini Shakti is the innermost core. It's like the body is great, but the soul's better. So Krishna is great, but his soul of soul is love, is love for Krishna, right? And therefore this tradition barely worships Krishna, right? They focus on Radha. So interesting, and they've been almost forgotten. There's a little bit of upsurge in Vrindavan right now. There's a few famous charismatic gurus in that tradition, right? That almost like people have like never know. Haven't noticed them for 300 years. They only have one temple in Vrindavan, for instance. They're not a major sect, right? But they're important. But it's an interesting flavor where they're honing in on this. That devotion is God, not God. Devotion to God is God, not God. Of course, this is a bhava thing. This is not the, but even so much so where they put bhava above tattva, right? They put bhava. The mood is above is a real tattva.
William Tupper said that when he leapt over the ocean, but Ram needed a bridge.
Yeah.
God himself, this is Narayan in the flesh, had to build a bridge.
Yeah. So these stories are meant to show that and there's hundreds of these stories in both Rama and so we have hundreds of stories that are collected by scholars. To illustrate these points from the Rama tradition and the Krishna tradition, right? And I think we could also, maybe somebody needs to go through these stories in the Ramakrishna tradition to find, right, with this particular highlighter in mind, right, to see how there's many examples like this in Thakur's Leela also. Anyways, Jai Ma. Do arati. Om Sri Guru. Om Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Sarvam Mangalyam Varenyam Varenam Shivam Narayanam Namaskritya Sarva Karmani Kariyet. Om Vishnu. Om Vishnu. Om Vishnu. Om Vishnu. Om Dha Vishnu Param Param Tarapashantu Surajiva Shaksharaatadam Om Avavijal Vitrova Sarva Vistam Gatopi Va Yashvara Pandari Kaksham Sabhaya Bhandra Suttihi Sri Vishnu Sri Vishnu Sri Vishnu. Om Naividyam Om Hum. Om Naividyam Om These are for far. Om Vidam Pantri Mahakalavairavā Sahitam Vilakshanagarabhair Mahātsevam Darshayami Namaha. Jai Ma 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 Jai Dakshineshwari Dakshina Kali ki Jai Ma Bhavatarini Dakshina Kali ki Jai Bhagavan Ramakrishna Paramahans Deva ki Jai Jagannatha Sri Sharada Devi ki Jai Acharya Swami Vivekananda Maharaji ki Jai Purnatir Drakyaneshwar Dham ki Jai Namah Parvati Pate Har Har Shiva Shambhu.
I'm also will now, we'll be doing Ram Nam, but for people who aren't going to stay for that, we'll be serving out prasad.
Also, we have a request. If you're not staying, if you could please take prasad and go. We are absolutely maxed out. We have no parking up there. So if anybody else comes, they have no parking. That's why we're trying to get the things across to have more parking.
The prasad thing.
Take it for shot, please take it outside. Books.
Okay, yes. Sorry.
Because today is Yogini Ekadasi, we'll chant Ramnam Sankirtan. These are hymns and names composed by Tulsidas. And we used to do this for many years, but from COVID we stopped. And so I'm extremely out of practice, so please forgive some of these verses I haven't sang in 6 years. So. May Tulsidas and Ram forgive any mistakes ahead of time. Usually we pray at the end, now I'm praying at the end. Mandir Darshan शरदध्वजं अप्रमेयं सीतापतिं रघुकुलवयस्यरीमम् अजानुबाहुभारविन्ददलायक्तक्षं राममीशचराविनाशकरं नमामि विदेहि सहितं दूरमृतदे ऐमं महामन्दप्रिये मध्ये पुष्पाङ्गासने मणिमये विरासने स्थितम् अग्रे वयच्छति प्रबद्धञ्जनसुते तत्कम्मनीयाम् भक्त्यान्तं भारतानिधि परिवृताम् रामं भजे श्यामलम् मन्यस्फुरस्पते हृदयस्मरे सत्यावरां च भवं भक्तिनन्दरात्मं भक्तिं प्रयाच्य राघुपूर्वक निर्भरं मे कमालिरोषरहितं गुणमानसं च. O Lord of the Raghus, shining in the hearts of all, you know well that we speak the truth when we say that we have no other desire than this prayer. Grant us unshakable devotion, O glory of the Raghus, and free our minds from stains of lust and other passions. Om Sri Sita Lakshman Bharata Savigraha Hanumat Sameta Sri Ramachandra Parabrahmane Namaha. Shura Brahma Parapara Kala Maka Parameshvara Shura Brahma Parapara Kala Come सकल गुण निधानम वरमनीशम रघुपति वरदूतम भक्तजनं नमामि वशवारिकृतवासी वशकीकृतराक्षसं रामायण महाभारतं वन्दे वीरात्मजम् अज्ञानानन्दवीरं जानकीशोकनाशनं कपीशमक्षं वन्दे लङ्काभयङ्करम् उल्लङ्घ्यसिन्धुशरीरं यशक्कविनीजनकीरत्मजय पदायतनैकलहारङ्का नमामि तं भ्रजनीरञ्जनेयं मनोजन्मत्सुरथूलवेगं चितन्द्रियं भूमिनश्वराशितं भारतमलं वर्णयुक्तमुख्य श्रीरामदूतं शिरसा नमामि अन्नमेयं मतिभावनं कञ्चारिकमनीयविग्रहं पारिजातथारुभूदासीनं भावयामि भुवनमानं यत्र रघुनाथकीर्तनं तत्र तत्र कृत्यमष्टकाजने पुष्पवारि परिपूर्णलोचनं मारुतिं नमस्मरामि नित्यश्रोतसतनाम रामायणं समानं जय राघवचंद्र की जय जय श्री महावीर स्वामी जी की जय श्री राम जय जय राम श्री राम जय राम श्री राम जय राम श्री राम जय राम श्री राम जय राम See,